We warmly welcome you all for today's session. Just Dialogue, which is a youth-based, independent and non-partisan think tank, is focused on doing legal work and policy research to make better laws. It was founded in July 2020, and we believe in enhancing informed legal and policy deliberations at various levels. Today with us, we have Ms. Marianka Singh. Ma'am completed her bachelor's degree in energy law from UPES Dehradun, and she further pursued her LLM from NLU Jodhpur. In 2019, she joined Manipal University Jaipur as an assistant professor, where she taught for a year. She's also cleared a UGC NET examination in 2018. Jurisprudence and international law are her areas of interest. Additionally, she has also worked upon analyzing the legality of Bitcoin in India, which was a part of her dissertation to fulfill the master's degree. She's also an ardent supporter of holistic development. Having been actively involved in finance, fine arts, and fashion shows at schools and pre-university levels, she was also the host for Miss Bihar in 2015. With this, I now hand over to Marianka ma'am.
Thank you, Abhimanyu, for that wonderful introduction. I'm rather fortunate to be here on this forum with everybody. Good evening, everyone. The king himself ought to be subject to God and the law, because law makes him king. In the 13th century, Bracton, a judge in the reign of Henry III, in a way introduced the concept of rule of law without naming it as rule of law. And this is one concept whose principles and tenets have been evolving ever since. COVID-19 has brought forth several new normals in front of us, and the rule of law in its application is no stranger to it. A very good evening to all the esteemed dignitaries, senior academicians, and their students and participants. Today, we are gathered over this webinar organized by Dissolve Dialogue on the theme COVID-19 and the rule of law. The webinar aims to discuss various challenges and opportunities in observing the rule of law in a world absorbed in pandemic. Thank you for joining us for today's session. I'm Marianka, Assistant Professor, IMS Unison University, would be the moderator ensuring smooth conduction of the webinar. Today, we are immensely fortunate to have here with us distinguished members of the legal fraternity. Dear participants, please join me in giving our dignitaries the most cordial of welcomes. The keynote speakers of this webinar are Honorable former Chief Justice of India, Mr. K.G. Balakrishnan. We are pleased to announce that the webinar will be facilitated and addressed by Honorable Justice K.G. Balakrishnan, former Chief Justice of India and former Chairperson, National Human Rights Commission of India. Justice K.G. Balakrishnan was the first judge from the state of Kerala to become the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. His tenure, lasting more than 3 years, have been one of the longest in the Supreme Court of India. Born on the 12th May, 1945, in Kottayam district, Kerala, Justice Balakrishnan enrolled as an advocate of the Kerala Bar Council in 1968 and pleaded both criminal and civil cases in Ernakulam Court. He was appointed as a Munsif in the Kerala Judicial Service on the 10th January 1973. Later on, he resigned from the service and resumed practice as an advocate in the Kerala High Court. In 1985, he was appointed as a judge of the Kerala High Court and was transferred to the Gujarat High Court in 1997. He became the Chief Justice of Gujarat High Court in 1998, and in 1999, he assumed charge as the Chief Justice of the High Court of Judicature at Madras. While being Chief Justice of Gujarat High Court, he also discharged duties of Governor of Gujarat for about 2 months, and also as a member of the General Council of the Gujarat National Law University. In 2000, he was appointed as a judge of the Supreme Court. He was sworn in as the Chief Justice of India on 14th January 2007 by then President APJ Abdul Kalam. After his retirement in 2010, He also served as the chairman of the National Human Rights Commission. It's remarkable that during his tenure as a judge, Justice Balakrishnan has delivered several landmark judgments dealing with constitutional and other matters, criminal laws, and public interest litigation. These include an order which made the midday meal program in schools a statutory requirement. This order brought relief to millions of poor children who had to discontinue their studies due to poverty. In a Kerala High Court judgment, he asked the Election Commission to debar the political parties which imposed hartals on public, causing suffering and loss to many. He was part of the bench which held that courts could not interfere in criminal proceedings in public interest litigation. He was also on the bench that upheld the constitutional validity of a provision in the Representation of People Act, changing the domicile norm for contesting elections to the Rajya Sabha. In 2007, in the case of Selvi and others versus State of Karnataka, the division bench headed by him held as unconstitutional forcible narco analysis, polygraph, and brain electrical activation profile or brain mapping tests by the investigating agencies, which were raising concerns on the human rights of the people. Justice Balakrishnan has also stressed the need for a holistic approach for the upliftment of women in diverse fields of politics, education, and economy. Mr. Justice Balakrishnan has participated in a number of international seminars and delivered thought-provoking lectures in various universities on legal topics. Sir, I cordially welcome you on behalf of everyone. We are immensely fortunate to have you here on the forum with us.
Okay.
Our
Right.
next speaker, right, sir. Our next speaker is Mr. Himanshu Sharma, Advocate and President, Bharatiya Janata Yuva Morcha, Rajasthan. Mr. Himanshu Sharma is a prominent advocate and had started his respectable legal profession in 2013. He has also been guiding youth by organizing orientation programs for quite some time now. He has served as former co-convener of legal commentary of Bharatiya Janata Yuva Morcha. He has also served as the Vice President of Bharatiya Janata Yuva Morcha. It is because of his philanthropic approaches and resilience with due confrontations of problems with society that Mr. Sharma has a repute of brilliance and is followed by many in this legal profession. Sir, we are very glad to have you on board with us. We welcome you on this session. Moving on, the term rule of law is derived from the French phrase La Principe de Legality, which refers to a government based on principles of law and not of men. In a broader sense, rule of law means that law is supreme and is above every individual. Like I mentioned just now, 2020 has been an unprecedented year, forcing us to adopt new ways of conducting our lives. Prima facie, this is definitely a public health crisis, but at the same time, we must not lose sight of related challenges that are consequential for containing this threat and for promoting a rapid and sustainable recovery. The struggle to uphold the rule of law is one of the foremost challenges in front of today. Our webinar today, for all the participants, it's very crucial to understand that this is based on discussing the intricacies of this struggle. A prominent challenges, which include perceptions of bias, disproportionate use of force, and other human rights issues. Challenges like those of absolute and emergency powers resting with the state. Can it undermine democratic institutions through its inordinate use? We have witnessed various incidents where testing and adequate treatment was not readily available to common man. While a part of India safely locked itself inside their homes during lockdown, there was another part of daily wage workers which was out on the streets, returning to their villages on foot. This certainly makes us question the validity of rule of law. There is an urgent need today to avoid endearing harm to rule of law principles and fundamental freedoms. With that, I take the opportunity to invite Mr. K.G. Balakrishnan, Honorable former Chief Justice of India, to address our participants with his valuable juristic insights on the theme. So please.
Good evening to all of you. rule of law
Good evening.
and COVID-19. I repeatedly asked the youngster who approached me, rule of law, I can understand, but what is the connection with COVID-19? So I was a little doubtful. What is the connection you are thinking of rule of law with the COVID-19? Of course, the rule of law, then I thought that the whole judicial system is seriously affected by the pandemic situation. Large number of cases are pending in various courts. We are not able to it feels one shudder. What will happen if this continues for a fairly long period? Already fairly long period, we are in trouble, and we are not able to conduct the regular litigation. Courts are not opened. Judges are not meeting the lawyers. Lawyers are not able to convey their arguments to the judge, and only some cases are taken up. And if in all the courts, civil, criminal, and the high courts and Supreme Court, the large number of cases are likely to come and without any proper argument or decision, this will lie down there for a long period. So there is virtually there is a failure of the rule of law in that sense, because the basic thing of rule of law is the supremacy of law. That is the first. Dicey is actually, when we say about Dicey, that he explained in his celebrated book Law and the Constitution. He wrote that book, and he gave what are the principles of the rule of law. We often also remember Edward Coke, the Chief Justice of England. He stood against James the First and said it is the business of the judge to decide, and the king cannot interfere in that. So then the Dicey's principle itself, the supremacy of law, equality before law, predominance of legal right. Dicey was even little critical about the administrative, the so many tribunals deciding cases in those days. So it is, but nowadays that we cannot say to be against the rule of law, because large number of cases are being considered. But we normally say 7 principles of law and order. That is, every state should have the law and order situation. And that is one day rule of law. When we say there is a rule of law in the country, then we mean that the law and order situation is really good, no interference by it. Then the fixed rules. We should know what is the rule, not on the basis of what is who is going to be governed by the rules. Fixed rules. Then elimination of discretion. Of course, we cannot eliminate the discretion in all, but the discretionary rights exercised by the court or the administrative authorities has got a problem of the discretion being exercised in favor of their favorites. So that is the discretion, elimination of discretion, but we cannot completely eliminate the discrimination, because discretion is always in any decision, discretionary principle should be, but it shall not be used without any principle. It should not be applied without in a biased way. Discretion based on these certain valid principles. Then due process of law, that is we call in the American Constitution, due process of law, the fairness. The law, anybody who is seeking redressal of any remedy under law should have the due process of law. Their fairness in the decision-making process should be the fairness. Then the natural justice, everybody knows what is natural justice, a right to be heard. And that is the natural justice, the very basic thing of natural justice. The preference for judges, that is the Dicey first said, the preference for judges rather than executive members deciding matters. In some parts of India, the Northeast, the all judicial matters were also decided by executives with much difficulty. After elaborate discussion and all, the powers of the executive magistrates were dissected and changed, and the judicial magistrate, the judicial system have come into force in the northeastern states. So the preference for judges have to decide the matters, not the executive authorities. Then the last is a judicial review of administrative action. Any administrative action taken by the executive should be subjected to judicial review. All these principles are under various provisions are incorporated in our constitution. So the right to equality is there, that is equal protection of law. Nobody shall be arrested without there being a proper procedure established by law. All these are incorporated in our constitution. That is the basic, the fundamental rights, or some of the even directive principles of state policy. All these rights are the incorporated in the constitution very carefully indeed. And also the three organs of the state, that is the separation of powers, that is also there in our constitution. Executive is different, judiciary is different, and parliamentary system is different. And all these, the different organs of the state have been given powers, and they shall not interfere each other in these powers. That is also there. The three organs of the division of powers, separation of powers. This is also in our constitution. And all these our decisions are also in the various decisions. All these are the reflected various decisions Supreme Court. The principles are, even though the only observing all these principles have been, and one important is our judicial independence. That is also basic concept of rule of law. Our judicial, and in one instance, we have even said one you all law students maybe ADM Jabalpur case where the said Supreme Court said that is always taken as a very decision not in accordance with the rule of law, because we said when the emergency was declared, the fundamental rights is kept in abeyance. It cannot be, Article 21 cannot be exercised. That is, it has no force. And the very famous judge, Justice H.R. Khanna said, no fundamental right, and Article 21 is based, whether it is constitution is there or not. The rights, that right, fundamental right is born rights. Once we are born, that right is there. Nobody can challenge and take away that rights. That is the decision, the minority judgment in the AD and Jabalpur case. And I need not explain, as so many other speakers are there. I don't want to take more time. These are the basic principles of rule of law, which we follow strictly. And whenever we say that anything illegally happening, anything, the executive authority take a decision, and the judicial review principles are fully incorporated in Article 32 of the Constitution and Article 226 of the Constitution. If any decision is taken, one can immediately challenge the this is the same by the before the court. So that is also judicial review principles of judicial review of administrative action. That is also we have taken it, and these are all the basic principles of judicial review which we all follow, and we are very careful whenever we divert from the principles of these rule of law, then we say the state is in an anarchy. So state is not following the rules. So the state is bound to every decision maker, either collector or revenue officer or customs officer, they are on the wrong path. We say the state is not following the rule of law. So this is basically thing, and I hope these are all the basic things which in pandemic situation our life is a little miserable, and we hope that this situation will be over as early as possible, so that we can have these sort of seminars and discussions alone is possible. And we hope I let the other participants express their views. With this, anything, if any time, I can also join with in the course of the discussion. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for actually illuminating and discussing various important and crucial pillars that we require. Concepts like elimination of discrimination, the due process of law, fairness in decision-making process, principles of natural justice that we cannot dispense away with, judicial independence, judicial review, and how all the stakeholders in this democratic setup have to especially and particularly and vigilantly, follow the rule of law, especially in times of a pandemic. So we are immensely fortunate that you could spare some time and join us and let our participants know your valuable insights on this topic. And so we look forward to having such discussions with you in your future, sir. Once the pandemic is over, sir, the best possible, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay. Should I continue, or I can take leave?
Sir, I'm afraid, sir, there is a question and answer round also, sir. But
I'll wait. I have no problem. My work today.
Sir, if at all.
Yes, I will
Fine,
wait.
sir.
No problem. No problem.
Okay.
I'll wait.
Right, sir.
Okay. I will.
Thank you so
also
much.
hear the other speakers' views.
Right.
Okay.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. Moving on. Now, I take this opportunity to invite our next speaker, Mr. Himanshu Sharma, Advocate and President, Bharatiya Janata Yuva Morcha. Sir, please, I now request you to address our participants and give us your valuable insights on the topic. Sir, please.
Honorable Justice KG Balakrishnan Sahab, Madam Maryanka, Team Jasol Dialogue. Rule of law and COVID-19. I believe that it is very easy to discuss rule of law separately and COVID-19 separately, but it is very difficult to connect both of them. But to connect both of them or to understand rule of law and COVID-19 together, I would like to divide the issue in two parts. The one part is, in that part we will discuss how the contracts may be enforced or performed during COVID-19 period, first part. Or the second part is how the law may be enforced during COVID-19 period or courts are working during COVID-19 period. The first part, which we are going to discuss, is more academician or more academic part, and the second part is practical part. How contracts may be performed or performance under the contract may be done, it has its answer in Contract Act. We will have to see the contract, if the contract has force majeure clause or not. If it has that clause, in that case, whether the situation of COVID is covered by that clause or not. If it is covered by that clause, in that case, I think question may arise that only lockdown period would fall within the purview of force majeure clause, or the period subsequent to the lockdown would also fall within the purview of force majeure clause. One point of discussion regarding frustration of contract may also arise if one is not going to take up the issue of force majeure clause. But this issue is, I think, more academic issue, and I believe that courts are working on this, and all these issues are before the courts, district courts, high courts. I think courts will answer these in their adjudication process. The another aspect which we have created, that is more practical, and I think all the academicians, all the judges, all the lawyers, they are facing, and they are facing that aspect. The aspect is how the courts are working during that period, and whether courts are successful in enforcing the law during the COVID-19 period. I believe that right now we can only discuss, because the history will be written after 50 or 100 years. At that point of time, historian will see whether at this point of time, courts are working properly or not. Academician will write whether this tenure or this time, during this time, judiciary was successful or not. But right now we can see what problems lawyers are facing, what problems judges are facing, and we can take this issue from the perspective of litigant also. As we all know, I think this is the first time when we have seen courts working virtually. And in my personal experience, not only some lawyers were uncomfortable with virtual courts, but I have experienced that some judges were also uncomfortable with the virtual courts. As a young lawyer, I may be happy with the virtual courts, but we have seen that there are senior lawyers, senior judges, all were not comfortable with the virtual courts. But we will have to appreciate the endeavor of the bar bench in imparting justice during this tough time also. At high court level, the courts were taking only urgent matters, and even at I think subordinate courts level also, the courts were taking urgent matters. And this is not my personal experience. I think Justice KG Balakrishnan Saab will also agree that if it is to be adjudicated, that what is urgency, I think this is psychological aspect. For advocate, everything is urgent. For litigant, everything is urgent. And I think judges work on different aspect. Judges may decide that whether this matter is urgent or not. But I have seen that I think urgency is a psychological aspect. If this is my matter, it is urgent matter. But during COVID time, I think lawyers were also deciding that if I have 10 matters, only 3 matters are urgent. And he will prefer to argue only 3 matters. Thereafter, judges will choose, high court will choose, or lower court, trial court judges will choose which matter out of these 3 matters are urgent. So I think there was a cooperation from the judges side, there was a cooperation from the lawyer side, and due to cooperative efforts, we have been able to face this time. The failure which I see from the perspective of a young lawyer is at 2 levels. I think at the district level, there was lack of infrastructure. And if at the metropolitan court, there was an infrastructure, in that case, staff was not well versed with the virtual courts and how the courts proceedings can be conducted virtually. So I think we should work on that, that not only judges should be well versed, not only lawyers should be well versed, but apart from our staff, our even lawyers, staff of lawyers office, as well as the staff of judges, they must be well versed with the proceeding, how the proceedings can be conducted virtually. Apart from the courts, I think litigants faced so much problem at the level of tribunals. This is a period where we have seen so much tribunalization. You cannot approach high court. Earlier, when in 2000, 2001, 2002, I think not much tribunals were created and people were approaching high courts under 226 of the Constitution of India. But I entered into practice in 2013, and we have seen that there are so many writ petitions. Writ petitions are being dismissed on the ground of availability of alternative remedy. That alternative remedy is available, you approach alternative remedy. Where is the alternative remedy? Alternative remedy is available at the tribunal level, SDM courts, and different courts. At these SDM courts, these courts were totally shut. They were not, because they were involved in the management of COVID-19, because they are administrative officers. So they were involved in the management of COVID-19. So at that point of time, if litigant wants some stay, at that point of time, he was facing so much problem. I would conclude with the advantage of this virtual court proceedings. I know that we want to appear court physically, but ultimately I see in post-COVID period, we do not want to appear through virtually, but I believe that it is going to enhance our skills, how to manage our office. Earlier, if you have one office in Delhi, you have one office in Jaipur and another office in another city, you were commuting from one place to another place to that place. But now I believe and I think that if courts are not going to work virtually, and we would prefer to appear physically, because if I am appearing physically, in that case, I would be able to assess the court in more efficient manner. But I believe that my office can be managed. My office can be managed virtually. If I have office in Delhi, I need not to go to Delhi on weekly basis, on monthly basis. I can manage it virtually. And I advise all the lawyers who are participating in webinar that yes, we would have to work hard. We would have to see that how we can appear in more courts, how we can manage our offices in different cities. So I think this is an arm, and this time has taught us so much. And we are waiting that COVID would be over, but these teachings are going to be with us. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Himanshu, for acclimatizing our participants on the various major impediments that the delivery justice system is facing during times of this pandemic, the pros of the system, and various endeavors that have been employed by every stakeholder in ensuring that there is no miscarriage of justice, even if at such difficult times. Thank you so much, sir. Can we open the house for questions? Can we, sir, have the question answer round?
Yes.
Honorable.
Yes.
Right, sir. Sir, there are, I'll just, sir, get on the hold of questions. Sir, couple of questions have been sent by our participants. Sir, I'll just read out the questions to you.
Read out. Yes.
Right, sir. Right, sir. Just a second, sir. Yes, sir. Honorable Chief, former Chief Justice, sir, I'll just read out the question. The first question reads out that India's lockdown is in administrative measures taken under the Central Disaster Management Act 2005 or by states under the Colonial Epidemic Diseases Act 1897. Neither of them are a COVID-19 specific act, effect of which was there was many irregularities in orders, irregularity in transportation, which left millions of people stranded without work and without any replacement support to survive. The restrictions were sometimes brutally enforced by police. Such scenarios question the validity of rule of law in times of pandemics. It raises concerns that what approach Supreme Court should adopt so that rule of law can be established in such times, or the courts should adopt hands-off approach, claiming it to be an administrative inefficiency. So that's the question.
Court can always interfere and give appropriate directions. The court cannot simply say this is administrative decision. All administrative decision could be challenged if it is violative of the basic principles of law, if it affects seriously affect the people. That is why even the public investigation and all what is happening in jails, what is happening by the administrative officers, court can always interfere. Policy decision, only one thing is that is, yes, government has adopted a particular policy. Court shall not interfere and change. No, this policy is not good. Government should not adopt that policy. That such a prerogative is not with the court. But the implementation of any policy decision or anything which seriously affect the rights of the people, then court can always either interfere it and prevent it, or once that the appropriate guidelines can be issued. There is nothing wrong in interfering in such matters. Even the public investigation, if you look into the various public investigation and the judgments issued by the courts, it is greatly, and especially for the Delhi people, there you may not know, there are large number of the industrial units in Delhi, and and all there were pursuant to the judicial decision of the Supreme Court. All these industrial units were taken out of the Delhi and started elsewhere out of the suburban areas. This is all strictly speaking, this is maybe from a conservative point of view, what is the authority of the court to do all these things, you may ask. But for the protection of the rights of the people, appropriate direction can be issued. We cannot shut our eyes or shrug our shoulders just by saying that this is administrative or policy decisions.
Right, sir. Thank you so much, sir. That was a question put forth by Ms. Ananya. The next question, sir, has been asked by Mr. Dipendra, another participant. I would like to humbly put forth the next question also. So which reads out that whether workers getting food is good enough to satisfy the judicial conscience, thus requiring further consideration of any issue related to wages or other entitlements. How many of them do actually get food or shelter? Or who are the millions marching on foot, traveling on cycles and rickshaw carts? It's considered as executive matters. What role judiciary can play in ensuring these human right needs of people? Right, sir. So that's the question.
Similar to the earlier question, it is a serious violation of human rights, but it was we have not handled this sort of situation. Suddenly it happened. When the lockdown was declared, people lost their job, they lost their employment, they lost wages. Large sections of the community was thrown into penury and poverty, and serious. Even now, many of the such people suffer. They have no employment. How many employers will pay wages when no work is extracted from them? So it is still a large number of people. They have no place to stay, no job. Then they were also under the impression they are not going to get any wages. So how do they feed them, their children? So they left, and a large number. But from hindsight, we feel that their sufferings could have been a little more attention could have been paid and alleviated, and that could have been done. But it is even now it is that sort of sufferings are being continued. We get the reports in the newspaper that they are many of them are seriously affected by the COVID situation.
Right, sir. Thank you so much, sir. So there is just one more question, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So this has been co-jointly put up. So, sir, the question reads out that Putta Swachment established right to privacy as a fundamental right. Mandatory installation of Arogya Setu app and the way it works. Can we say that it is itself violative of the privacy of an individual?
Right to privacy is now recognized as a fundamental right. That is a we have to welcome that decision, the right to privacy. But this sometimes we make use of the technology, and the technology has certain defects. So it is something it is put on the web or anything, then it could be somebody else could make use of it. And to make it, but in a large country like this, we should have our own identity. Either these Aadhaar and all. We cannot simply say that I am a citizen. I don't want to divulge anything of my private affairs. It is not a. We should disclose not very personal things, but disclose our identity in the sense that there is nothing wrong in it. We should be proud that we are a citizen of this country, and anything what is our personal details are disclosed, nothing is going to happen, and we shall not cling on to the right to privacy in these matters. That is all divulged and all. But the authorities also should be careful in seeing that some of the information collected by the officers for the purpose of insurance, education, health, or anything shall not be lightly divulged to others. But in this technology is spread over the whole world. So whatever happens, we see the moment whether Trump or Biden who won within the seconds we know that. So that is the advancement of technology. So we cannot, some of the details are divulged. We need not be so touchy about these things. That is whenever we make use of the technology, we have to think that the technology may have some disadvantage also. So anyway, it's a right to privacy is a valuable right. One can the Prabhupada Puttaswamy case is that I think these matters are still being considered by a larger bench or something like that. It is still so we cannot take in these matters. We cannot say a final word at any point of time.
Thank you, sir. Honorable sir, sir, we would also take views of Himanshu sir. And sir, there is one more question, sir, if you could bear with us for 5 more minutes.
Okay.
sir. So just 5 more minutes if you could bear with us. Himanshu, sir, there's a question that has been put forth by Mr. Anisur. Himanshu, sir, am I audible to you?
Yes, yes, go ahead.
Right, sir. Sir, I'll read out the question. The question reads out, just a second, sir. Yes, sir. That in context of vaccine distribution, India must consider 2 key questions. How may India get access to a COVID-19 vaccine? And if it does, how will it ensure fair and equitable distribution among its large and diverse population? Do you think such fair distribution can be ensured without the intervention of courts and other authorities?
See, first of all, our government is making endeavor that we should not be the importer of vaccine and we should export the vaccine. And I think government is going to export only once we are self-sustainable. One thing. Secondly, as far as vaccine distribution is concerned, it is difficult for a country like India. But as health minister has also stated that firstly, and even WHO is emphasizing on this, that firstly, it will be distributed amongst those who are more vulnerable, who are needy, like senior citizens, pregnant women. I think in this manner, government will make a policy, and on the basis of that policy, it will be distributed. And yes, if there is any violation of that policy, our courts are there.
Right, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Honorable Balakrishnan, sir, there is one more question for you, sir. If you would permit, sir, I'll read out.
Okay.
Read the last question, sir. Thank you so much, sir. I'll read out the question, sir.
Okay.
Right, sir. So the question reads out that, sir, you have remained the president of NHRC for a significant amount of time. You
Yes.
saw this institution growing and getting a prominent place in the field of human rights. People look towards this institution as something that can safeguard their human rights and their effective implementation. Do you think NHRC is able to play that role, that it needs to be keeping in mind that it is the apex institution for the protection of fundamental rights? In this, is this right that the way NHRC Act is drafted, it makes NHRC a toothless tiger, heavily reliant on government, even for the basic things? What are some suggestions to take this institution towards the level it deserves? So that's the question.
All NHRC is a commission. All commissions are recommendatory body. So it is not an executive organ where their decisions are to be implemented ruthlessly by executive officers. But I must say, whenever there is NHRC directions are issued, then that is completely obeyed. 99% such directions are obeyed by the state. So no state would raise any objection. That is only very carefully the orders are passed when there is a violation of human rights. But the violation of human rights in a country like India, large country like India, we earlier only received petitions, complaints from various states. But when we felt that the violations are really happening inside in the interior parts of the country, so it is in our villages. So we started going to the places. We went to Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Chhattisgarh, Tamil Nadu, UP, Bihar, and all those places, and conducted the received complaints, heard the people directly. Then only we realized that the human rights violations are happening, and we gave thereafter, we meet the officers, we meet the concerned officers, the Home Secretary and senior officers of the state, and give appropriate directions. some of them, they are also not aware of what is really happening in the country. So it is a very powerful in that sense to come. It is not a court. So it is, we cannot say that it is a toothless organ. It is protecting the rights of the people. And it is a poor man's court. So that is nobody can go to court. Sometimes it may be very expensive. So a simple complaint to the Human Rights Commission may solve the problem of that person. That is, in large number of such petitions, complaints are solved, and we give appropriate directions to the various officers, government. They are all complied with, fully complied with. There is, I don't agree with the view that it is a toothless organ.
Right, sir. Right, sir. Thank you so
Okay.
much, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank
Sir,
you. Thank you.
Right. Sir, Himanshu, sir, there is a last question for today's forum that has been addressed to you. Sir, I'll just read out the questions and then we will be done with the question answer round. Himanshu, sir, I'll read out the question. It says that we saw the effect of corona on legal profession as well. Large number of advocates found it extremely difficult to navigate through this phase due to paucity of money. Bar councils played their part by disbursing amount from Advocates Welfare Fund to needy advocates. So what young lawyers can do along with litigation in their early days in order to make a decent living for themselves. Also, a lot of law students and professionals felt depressed and demotivated during this phase. Can you give away a few words for encouragement for them, Himanshu, sir?
Yes, Marianka, it is true that it is a tough profession for young lawyers like us. And the situation during COVID period was, it is very unfortunate that lawyers chose to go in other fields. But I think as a young leader, I not only think about lawyers, young lawyers, but I also think about our munshis, our office clerks. And I raised voice about them also. As far as young law students are concerned, I think the COVID is not permanent. I think in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, it is going to go. So thereafter, even young lawyers have so much scope to go in this profession, to rise in this profession. And there is a saying that in Hindi, Sanyam और संभावनाएं साथ साथ चलती हैं. Patience, if we will keep patience, it will give us opportunity. So keep patience with you. I think we have so much opportunities in future, and we will do, we are not going to do much for us, but we are going to do for the society. And this is a profession where we are not earning money, but we are doing social work. So keep doing social work, keep patience. We are going to have so much opportunities. Don't worry about that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
sir. Now I would invite Himangini, a student from Manipal University, Jaipur, to propose a vote of thanks to our dignitaries for being here.
Okay.
Himangini, over to you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. Greetings, everyone, on behalf of Just World Dialogue. We feel delighted to express our deep note of gratitude and warm regards to our honorable and respected speakers, Honorable Justice Balakrishnan Sir, former Chief Justice of India, and Advocate Himanshu Sharma Sir, President Bharatiya Janata Yuva Morcha, for accepting our invitation and donating their time and sharing enlightening, knowledgeable value inputs. Thank you, Balakrishnan Sir and Himanshu Sir. Surely our audience would have learned from every bit of the session. Thank you to Ms. Marianka ma'am, our moderator, for sailing the session through so smoothly. We would also like to thank our associate partners, Juice Corpus, publishing partner, Itching the Patch, and all our media partners for their assisting hand. Lastly, but not the least, we would like to thank our audience for attending the webinar and making it a successful one. Thank you, everyone, and best wishes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you, sir.